As we look at the end of the story of Cain and Abel, we find a rather interesting passage where Cain is complaining about being more or less exiled from the other people on earth at the time because of what he had done in killing his brother and becoming a murderer. And he complains that it's too harsh of a punishment, and everyone who finds him will kill him. And God says, whoever slays Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain so people wouldn't kill him if they found him. We don't know what that mark was, but there was obviously the plan of God at this time. We're going to stop killing with this murder. Cain killed Abel. He says it was a very bad thing, and you have a consequence from that. And then Cain says, well, someone's going to kill me now. And God says, no, let's stop the killing right now. And no one's supposed to kill you. We're stopping murder. We're stopping bloodshed right here where it started. Well, as Cain goes out and starts a civilization, we find that rather than being a fugitive and a vagabond, a wanderer, he actually establishes a city in verse 17. And as you get down to verse 19 through 22, a nice little civilization is being developed. They have agriculture, they have metallurgy, they have the arts, music and the arts, everything going pretty well. And the fifth generation from Cain, it says in verse 23, was a guy named Lamech who said, hey, listen to me, my wives. He's the first one who was said to take more than one wife. Of course, God had said at creation, a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Here in this civilization started by Cain, the rebel, Cain the murderer, one of his descendants was the first mentioned who takes on more than one wife. And he says to his wives, you know what? I've killed someone. The word killed, the same word for killing Abel by Cain earlier in the Bible. And here, a few generations later, he's saying, look, I've murdered someone, but you know what? He hit me first. And so, if God said that anyone who kills Cain is worthy of 7 times vengeance, well, for me, I'm even better, so it should be 77 times vengeance. A very strange development in the civilization. There was something God did in mercy to stop the repetition of murder, of killing one another, and then someone decides to use the very thing that God did in mercy to justify murdering someone else. It was a very big degradation of that purpose. It's interesting that after the flood occurs, and Cain's civilization and the world before the flood, not only Cain's but everyone else, except Noah and his family, that whole civilization having been destroyed, that when God makes a covenant with Noah after the flood, he makes a point of saying in chapter 9, Genesis chapter 9, verse 5 and 6, surely the blood of your lives I will require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. At the hand of every man, at the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. Now, way back after Cain, God made it clear it's a terrible thing for a man to kill another man. And I want it stopped right now. Well, a few generations later in Cain's civilization, it was not stopped. And matter of fact, it increased. Some of the verses we see in Genesis chapter 6, it says that God saw, Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, Genesis 6, 5, God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was evil every day. And it repented the Lord, he'd made man on the earth. It grieved him in his heart. He said, I'm going to destroy them. And if you go to verse 11, it says, the earth was corrupt before God. The earth was filled with violence, and God looked upon the earth. It was corrupt. All flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. The world, the antediluvian, the pre-flood world, had become greatly depraved. And it says it was filled with violence. And what God had started by saying, we're going to stop anyone killing their brother right now. Doesn't happen. Not going to happen again. No, it started happening and happening again. So much so that when the flood was over, God made a very specific point to Noah and his sons to make, listen, if someone kills somebody, they're killed. Simple as that. So we're not going to allow this to grow and grow. If someone kills someone, the murderer, the killer, is killed. That's the way we're going to do it. Even an animal kills a person, that animal is killed. Any person kills a person, that person is killed. And so that was the way God, after the flood, said, yes, murder happens, but murder is going to have consequences. There will not be protection anymore of the murderer. There will be judgment on the murderer, and they themselves will die. So very interesting. Now, it does give this little picture of this wild, chaotic earth, but that's not really what it says according to the words of Jesus. It was a very depraved world, and it was a murderous world, murders happening all over the place, and yet as far as chaotic, no. Remember that Cain, one of the main ancestors of this pre-flood world, was a proud individual and proud of his accomplishments. And as we look at the recorded history of the civilization with their great strides in agriculture, in metallurgy, in music and arts, it was a civilization that could take pride in its accomplishments. And yet God's intervention in lives was irrelevant. What God had to say didn't matter. That's what happened with Cain and his problem with his offering. What I do is good enough. You should accept it. And God says, no, there's a way that I prescribe that you should come to me. My way is good enough. So you have a civilization that is full of pride and also destroying each other, also because of pride. And yet they've been able to do great accomplishments. Matter of fact, all of your old legends of Atlantis and a perfect world, a golden age of the world before destruction, have their roots in what's told us here in the Bible about the world before the flood. There was a world that was advanced as civilization, a world that did not really want to take consideration of what God has to say into the picture, because what they were doing was fine. They were all fine. It's interesting that as we go to Matthew chapter 24, when Jesus talks about the end of the world, in verse 37 of Matthew 24, it says, as it was in the days of Noah, that's how it will be in the coming of the Son of Man. For as they were in those days that were before the cataclysm, or the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until what day Noah entered into the ark, and they did not know until the cataclysm, the flood, came upon them, took them all away. That's the way it will be in the appearing of the Son of Man. In other words, as he said, no one knows the day or hour. It will be rather sudden when it happens, but life is going on with proud people thinking that they are in control of their life and they can do whatever they want. And so back in the time before the flood, yes, it was a corrupted civilization. It was a violent society. It was a society that believed that murderers needed protection rather than judgment. And yet at the same time, they were advanced, they were accomplished, and they're marrying, giving in marriage, providing food and drinking, enjoying life within their own framework. And then sudden destruction came upon them, and it says that every single person alive died except for Noah and his family in the ark. We'll see that in chapter 6 through 9. But it's a good warning. Although this civilization before the flood was entirely destroyed by water, God made a promise through the rainbow there will not be a destruction entirely by water again, and yet Jesus said there is coming a day. Trial, tribulation, worse than anything that's ever been in the world before. And that will usher in the coming of the Son of Man. And he says, be ready, for when you don't think it's going to happen is when the Son of Man comes. Now, we do have some eschatological additions to add to this thing, but the principle, the thought, is true. That we should be ready to meet Jesus at any time, not hiding behind our pride or our arrogance, not thinking that what we do is good enough, but we fall at the feet of Jesus and say, I am a sinner, Lord, and I can only be saved because of what you've done for me. I believe in you, Jesus, and I want to live with you forever. That saves us from the doomed civilization in which we now live. My thoughts for today. Thanks for listening.